So, if you've spoken to a vegan about animal agriculture, you may have been asked a question like, where do you draw the line? Why animals, not plants, not rocks, tables, etc.? The vegan will likely have either stated sentience or alluded to it using a phrasing that fits the description. And perhaps you will have said, oh, well, I draw the line somewhere else. Intelligence, use of complex language, or some quality that we can't know about anybody else. Whatever it is, I'd like to make the case for sentience quite clear. First off, the line that we're drawing here is, to whom do we afford moral consideration? To whom do we extend this basic group of respect? Not to be unduly killed, violated, exploited, physically harmed, and psychologically distressed. For most of us, we understand not to engage in this kind of treatment to other humans, and in general conduct, we find ourselves extending this courtesy to most animals, those that cross our path day to day. However, when it comes to the select species that are bred for food production, they endure all of these violations. But the vegan case is to mercifully remedy this injustice and show these animals the same basic courtesy. But why? We draw a line somewhere, you big vegan. Why should I draw it where you say? Well, let's understand the problem. We know that there are some who we shouldn't expose to these harms. Fairly obviously, we pretty much all agree that we shouldn't harm one another. But on a very basic level, why? Well, it's because we know from our own experience, or our ability to empathise, how it feels to suffer. We can understand the experience of suffering. Similarly, we can experience positive empathy. Essentially, we know how it feels to feel. We are all experiencing being. We avoid harming each other because we are aware that we are each having a subjective experience and can experience positive or negative. We can experience suffering. If we are attempting to define moral behaviour in relation to the problem of who is owed moral consideration, membership of that group can only reasonably be attributed to a criteria relevant to the problem. It would make zero sense to say that in order to behave morally in regards to moral value, I will avoid causing harms to anybody who walks on hind legs, or anybody of the land, or anybody with a specific intelligence level, or anybody who can offer me protection. A transactional basis is no basis for morality at all. Or anybody with an ability to plan or repeat patterns, etc. Or something else which puts an impossible burden of proof on those who are not able to communicate complex ideas with humans. The problem is one of subjective feeling, of the experience of a subject. And so too should the solution be. This is why we should value sentience. Sentience is defined as being able to perceive or feel things. It is directly rooted in the problem, and drawing the line based on an unrelated criteria would be arbitrary, which is a dangerous move. No one arbitrary line is more or less grounded than another is, and this is how we otherize. As soon as one draws an arbitrary line, we are indulging our own biases and allowing others to do precisely the same. This otherizing easily leads to forms of bigotry that any moral person would oppose today. But as we fail yet to analyze our behavior, the danger is already realized. We indulge our own comfort and preferences by drawing the arbitrary line in some unanalyzed, unconsidered position wherever it is most convenient for us. and those who choose to enjoy the products of animal exploitation will allow for others who are owed moral value to be exploited and to endure horrendous suffering purely because they are in a position where they are able to dominate them. If the problem of who do we assign moral consideration to is one of violating another's subjective experience, and we attempt to solve this in any way other than affording it to those with a subjective experience, then we are simply engaging in nonsense. And it would be as valid to assign it to nobody at all, which is evil. So, who is sentient? Basically, animals. Human and non-human animals are sentient. There may be some grey areas, but this is the general rule. Sometimes people do like to question this. Quoth René Descartes, "It is the doctrine that brute animals are mere machines or automata, devoid not only of reason, but of any kind consciousness." But Descartes doubted everything. He's also attributed the quote, "I think, therefore I am." Descartes knows only his own experience to be real, and has no reason to believe that you have an experience, or that you exist at all. This is not how most of us relate to one another. He also describes reason as being the only thing that makes us men and distinguishes us from the beasts, suggesting that he hadn't really thought through this topic properly. I mean, reason as a place to draw the line is as arbitrary as any of the others that I stated, and man stripped of reasoning is not like a machine, so if that's what sets us apart from the beasts, then, well, the beasts aren't machines. Alas, he's also attributed the quote, "The greatest minds are capable of the greatest vices as well as the greatest virtues," so I guess I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and just say this was one of his vices. Bad Descartes. Punching out on the other side of the philosophical argument, 19th century Tremabod, Arthur Schopenhauer, is quoted, "The assumption that animals are without rights and the illusion that our treatment of them has no moral significance is a positively outrageous example of Western crudity and barbarity. Universal compassion is the only guarantee of morality, and he was so right." Good dreamboat. Beyond philosophy, sentience in animals is widely observed. We can clearly observe that animals perceive and feel. It's self-indulgent and cruelly dishonest to deny it. What's more, this is of scientific record. Animals display emotional bonding. Food, impatience, grief, fear, humour, and even superstition are all documented in scientific research. I'll share more on this in another video, because it's really quite fascinating what we can observe about the behaviour of animals, and quite sad that those who don't realise the extent of their experience choose to write them off as being machine-like, subject them to undue, infinite suffering. As of now, animal sentience is a matter of scientific consensus. At this point, I honestly feel those who feel permitted to deny them moral consideration are indulging their own gratification at the expense of another, and I encourage you into looking into veganism. It is probably much easier than you think, and if you are not compelled, I now encourage you to look into the reality of the animal agricultural industry and see for yourself the suffering that you demand. I'll leave some links in the description below. You can check them out to learn more. Sentience.